Dave Scott Hub Media back with Lisa from CMHA. You are the facilitator, mental health promotion and education. And let's get into it. Thanks for doing the last show. Let's do a quick update because you were hanging out with the hockey team. What was going on there?
So we had the game day held by the Brantford Bulldogs. It was held on Wednesday, February 25th. Um, Everything went amazingly. We have a huge support from the Brantford Bulldogs, whether it be the team themselves, the owners, as well as the players. And one of our biggest advocates is the goalie for the Brantford Bulldogs, David Egorov. He has been a huge advocate in promoting mental health, creating awareness, promoting and creating fundraising events for us. So last summer, he did something for us, and we had the opportunity, or the Bulldogs have the opportunity of choosing a charity or a cause that they would like to have a donation done or given to, and we were presented with a check from the Brantford Bulldogs on center ice the night of our game for $9,000 to help us with our mental health promotion and education program, and continuing on with the Talk Today program, which is it was definitely an experience, and it was a night for sure.
That's pretty cool too, because when we did that podcast and you were talking about talking to these the hockey players about the mental health, I just loved it, and it's great to see them give back too, to get involved and understand the value of what it is in the community.
Absolutely.
So that's really
Thank
cool.
you. Thank you.
Today, I want to pick your brain because one of the topics that we touched on last time was anxiety a little bit. And I really wanted to get your take because I know people, family members that struggle with it a lot. And it's always, it's a tough conversation to have sometimes because you don't really understand how an anxiety can affect somebody from leaving the house. You know what I mean? How that fear can be built. And I sort of wanted to get your take on anxiety first, and then talk about some of the programs that you guys have at CMHA, if you don't mind.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
One of the things I didn't really understand about anxiety, and I would always be that old school guy to tell him, "Suck it up, let's go." You can't, probably not the right answer by any means. How should I be dealing with someone that I know that maybe struggles with anxiety?
A lot of the times we always talk about approaching it with empathy.
Yeah.
Um, and also the other piece is to not also always having to identify why somebody might come across as anxious or nervous. It's just being there with them at that moment. Tell me a little bit of what's going on. They might want to talk about something else that has nothing to do with being anxious or anything like that, but it's also allowing them to be able to feel comfortable having a conversation with somebody. So just coming from a place of curiosity can also be a helpful piece, because it's not that you're peppering them with questions. It's not that you're giving them an inquisition, but you're coming from, so what's going on? How can I help? It gives that reassurance for somebody to know that they're being heard, and that recognizing that they have a little bit of a process, or there might be something that they're apprehensive of. And one of the things that can be helpful is it opens the door for communication. It opens the door for somebody to be able to talk about it, which then actually can deplete their anxious feelings, because it then normalizes it. So it allows them to be able to take next steps forward. And sometimes being able to talk about it can be all that's really truly needed, because they just need to be able to, for lack of a better term, getting it off their chest, getting it out there, and being able to figure out what that process is. And sometimes, even through talking through whatever it is that you're feeling anxious about, is its own process in getting rid of it. So thinking about it's cathartic. And by the time you've gone through the process, you might actually have a resolution, or you might have something that's brought down that anxious feeling or that anxious notion that you're dealing with.
Is the process facing the anxiety head on? Like, is that like, I'm kinda curious now because if you don't face it at some point, doesn't it just build to other things like, maybe other mental health issues?
It can. I guess ultimately it's totally dependent, and it's always individually.
Yeah. Okay, good point.
Right? So everybody has anxiety, and anxiety can always be a good thing. It can be a motivator. It can be one of those things, but it's how you actually handle it and what skills you have in place that can be helpful. And it's identifying Where's that line that, dealing with a little bit of, you're going in for a job interview, you're going to be anxious, but what are the skills that you do to help yourself? Sometimes it's deep breathing, sometimes it's taking that moment to just become present. But it's the skills that you have to help calm your nerves and what those pieces can be. Not dealing with it, yes, can lead to increased anxiety, can lead to further concerns and additional pieces of anxiety that you've never dealt with before, but it can lead to panic attacks. I have a
Right.
one who has dealt with anxiety his whole life. His father had anxiety, and it actually led to, at one point in time, because there were no coping skills, there weren't things put in place prior to, panic attacks, and to the point where concerned, thinking it was something very dramatic with a heart attack, but it was actually a panic episode. So then from there, he actually was able to look and recognize how best to help himself and develop some skills through meditation, through deep breathing, through distraction, like going through different pieces to help. Did he deal with the anxiety head on? Sort of, but he used the skills necessary to be able to counteract the thoughts that he was having that led to that increased anxiety, ultimately into a panic attack.
Do people with one of the things I've noticed, and help me with this too. I feel like if there's some folks in my life need constant routine and it needs to be absolutely the same every day.
Mhm.
And when you veer off that road a little bit, the anxiety just comes right out. And you're kind of like, well, but life isn't, our lives always can't be that symmetrical. They can't be like that.
Right.
Coping skills there, is it the same thing? You're basically saying, okay, let's reframe this.
Reframe it, take a pause, count to 10. Again, everybody's coping skills can be different. It's developing that toolbox.
Right.
And that toolbox can be an unlimited number of tools. Sometimes the tools that worked for you today might not work tomorrow, but they will in a week. So recognizing what has worked for you at times versus what doesn't. If something doesn't work constantly, then you know that's not a tool for you. But if it's worked sometimes and then one time it doesn't mean that it's not a viable tool. So if you're trying to do, say, deep breathing, for instance, and you're trying to ground yourself and calm your breathing, because when we're anxious, our breathing can be very shallow. So taking those deep breaths in, bringing oxygen into our system and those pieces, those can be helpful. If it doesn't work, that's okay. What's the next thing that can help you? Listening to music, going for a walk, sometimes short bursts of energy of some sort of exercise, jogging in place for 30 seconds. It can also be a kinesthetic release of your physical movements that can be helpful. Ultimately, it totally depends on what the person does that helps them. Sometimes, if they're anxious, maybe it's fidgeting, having something to play with in your hands when you're dealing with something or you're having that anxious moment. Sometimes it's something simple like cold, having a cold face cloth put on your face, on the back of your neck to help reduce those physical sensations. I've got, there's
Yeah, there's
thousands of
tons of
options.
techniques. Yeah.
It totally depends on what works for you, and recognizing that if you move from one to the next and continually giving it time and trying to figure out what works for you and using those as you might have 5 core ones and then another that you might use maybe in higher anxiety moments or other ones that you know have worked, and you have the ability to do them a little bit more in depth.
So, how do you get to the bottom of anxiety? What caused it? Can you get to the root cause, or is that something that, like, I'm curious because sometimes yourself, if you're in a situation, you're like, well, that's what I did that caused this to cause this feeling, and then you address it. You confront it a little bit and say, no, this I control this. You don't control me.
And,
Like,
and sometimes that's the empowerment piece, taking it back. So taking
yeah,
your own piece, that can be helpful, and that's
huh,
another thing is too, and there's cognitive behavior therapy.
yeah.
There's all sorts of different apps that can be used through various pieces. Calm would be one of them. Um, Even looking at having a call to a crisis line. If you're
Yeah,
feeling like that heightened with
yeah,
anxiety and you need to have a crisis line within the Brant County, Haldeman, Norfolk area, or 988 if your mental health is
yeah.
to those points. Those are great resources that can help. If you already have somebody that you're working with through counselor, or sometimes there's walk-in counseling services for those one-offs and you're wanting to, they can provide you with some tools to help you. Ultimately, it depends on you recognizing where and what it is that you want to do. And it is self-determined led. Supports are out there to help guide you through, but you're at the lead. We are there as a passenger to help you navigate through that, but we are not there to drive the car for you.
And to maybe let's just touch base because the realm of different anxieties is huge now. Like we don't, you could have a fear of red trucks, right? And that
Yep.
creates an anxiety. And it's just there's work anxiety, like you said. There's stress anxiety to a certain degree, and there's so many different components in a person's life in a day. Like you said, we all have anxiety, but hopefully we can regulate it enough to maintain a sense of balance of who we are. It's
Yep.
when those moments come, right, that you need to sort of figure out, okay, how do I get through this moment? When you're dealing with multiple anxieties like that, I mean, I get like one of the things I read about and I wanted to get your thoughts was some people do journaling,
Yep.
like an anxiety
Journaling.
journal. Can
Yep.
let's touch on
Absolutely.
that.
Yeah. So journaling can be a great resource. It can be, honestly, truly, it's a great resource, not just for anxiety. It can help with mood. It can recognize mood pieces too. So depression, that sort of stuff.
Yeah,
Journaling is a great way of processing our thoughts. When I talk about getting it out there and putting it out into reality and minimizing or normalizing things, journaling can help that too. It might not be person you're talking to, but the journal could be the same way. It's another way of even looking at gratitude too. So it totally depends on what the person utilizes a journal
right.
for, because it's helpful in their process. It's helpful in them being able to, maybe it's taking a situation and running it through and putting it out there. Once you have it out there, sometimes it's easier to not be caught in your head and to ruminate on things too, which can also feed more into your anxiety if you're continually running it through your head. Journaling is a way of getting it out there. It's no different. Another option is writing a letter to somebody. If sometimes
Yeah.
we have those pieces where we need to get something out there, we need to write. Doesn't mean you have to send it.
No.
Truly just means that you're getting it out there. It's a way of you validating your own feelings, but also being able to figure out how to be able to move forward. So when you talk about different types of anxiety, there's generalized anxiety, you talked about
Mhm.
phobias. There's even points where people, and I've had some people that health anxiety, consistently fixating on various concerns with whatever their health ailments are, and they could fall down that rabbit hole of Dr. Google and all this sort of stuff to the point where they've got a slight cough, and all of a sudden they're looking at all the different pieces. There's effective ways of using internet. There's effective ways of using it, but also recognizing, is this helpful or hurtful? And that's where cognitive behavior therapy also comes into play. There's a great resource through the Ontario Structured Psychotherapy Programs, which is cognitive behavior therapy based, and it's anxiety based. And they work through the bounce back program, and they use all those different pieces in identifying, maybe it is focusing on those thoughts. Where do those thoughts come from? What would be one of those triggering events? And it's very structured to have somebody week by week or every other week, whatever it is, to have those conversations with somebody who is trained in CBT to start going through the process, utilizing the workbooks and doing that, which is, again, it's another program, but it's a free program as well.
Cool. That's really cool. I do, and on your point about the journaling too, because with the hub and obviously rating stories every month, I'm always amazed if it's something personal that I'm putting down on paper that I share, how the feeling is afterwards when I'm done.
Mhm,
Sometimes it feels like I've just dealt with something I'd put aside.
mhm.
And that by allowing that, sharing that to other people, I'm always amazed when somebody will reach out to me and go, hey man, thanks for that story. And you see that with people and you understand then you're like, oh, so we're all going through this. I think that's the other part that we kind of forget is
You're
like
not
we get
alone.
locked in our own world, don't we? And then
Yeah,
we forget that everybody else is dealing with the same stresses or,
yeah,
into a certain degree. And, helping them cope by sharing that, you're saying it's okay. We're all in the same boat. Let's get through this.
yeah, absolutely. And it's definitely one of those pieces recognizing you're not alone. You're not the only one that's dealt with it, but it's also not so this is where that peer piece comes, and that support piece is it recognizes the fact that although other people similar situations or maybe not always similar situations, but they're still relatable
There's a
piece.
connection.
There
Yeah.
is, and it's a helpful piece to know that, 1, you're not alone, and that maybe, again, outsiders, and I always look at this piece, somebody is an outsider, it's easier at times to be able to see things as an outsider.
Yeah.
However, keeping in mind that we can't always tell somebody to focus. We might see that bigger picture, and it's if you've never ever seen the video, The Nail in the Head, I recommend.
Yeah, you sent me that one. That was so good.
So I always go back to that is we might have suggestions, we might have solutions, but we also have to ensure that the person is focusing on what they feel they want to talk about, not our agenda either.
Well, sometimes you're so close to somebody, right? You can't see,
Yep.
right? And I think that to me, when somebody sends me something on an article I put out, it's always like, oh, because it was a bigger forum for them to look at it in.
Yep.
They could self-reflect, or they could see that in someone else that maybe they weren't recognizing. And I think that's such a cool tool that we get to use at the hub for sure. Um, when you were talking about cognitive behavior therapy, could you just, for folks, I've read on it, but maybe
Mhm.
could you encapsulate that so folks can understand what it is?
So it's a way of challenging. Easiest way I explain it to people when I talk about it is it's a way of recognizing you identify the thoughts, you identify the feelings behind it, you identify and you not challenge, but you actually dissect it, you look further into it, and it's a way of actually recognizing was it again, I talk about helpful and hurtful thoughts and that sort of stuff. How is this helpful in being able to move forward? So when you're dealing with or working with cognitive behavior therapy, you might have a situation and you break it down. And sometimes breaking that down and recognizing feelings because feelings, emotions, we all have them. And when we're dealing with them, it it can be so much for us in being able to process. So it's a way of taking the time to slow it down. Obviously, you're not going to be doing CBT in the middle of a crisis because that's not going to help. But it could be something that could be helpful as a reflective piece afterwards.
Yeah.
'Cause you might find that when you look back at it and you're reflecting on it and you're looking at your reactions, you're looking at your emotions, you're looking at all those different pieces, it can give you that insight if you face a similar situation, if you're dealing with something of any sort of realm. It's a way of determining how best to be able to shift your thinking is the easiest way. It takes time, it takes practice. It's not something that once you do one step in CBT, you're done. It is to me, it's always one of those ongoing life learning pieces. You're always going to build off of what you're doing. What you're doing is laying a foundation to be able to build on that and then develop skills as you go along.
That's a really good point too. And the other point on that, we can shift two ways. When you're younger, the anxieties are different than when you're older. So
Absolutely.
there's, like you said, it's a lifelong learning process because you're trying to figure out at each step how to cope with certain situations and understand them better. And I think as you age, I hope you sort of see, you go, oh, well, that really wasn't so much of a problem. I think I maybe created more of that in my own mind than I needed to, right? Or I think we've all been in that scenario, and I wonder too, and I want this. I'm holding you up, and I'm sorry because I got so many questions, but
No.
as a younger generation, when I see the younger generation, boy, I had it a lot different. And I kind of see the problems that they're facing today to me, they seem 10 times bigger.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh boy, how do you get through all this stuff? Right. Because my reality was probably a lot simpler on what my goals were and where I was getting to in my life. But theirs, wow, there's in a lot of cases, it's been such a big change.
Mhm.
I look at my 2 kids and they're trying to see they're in their 20s, but, they're looking at life differently. They wanna change the world. They want things where I was looking at, "How do I save that money to get that house or that car?" And
Yeah.
I think that's a big change, and I worry because, when you're young, you have expectations,
Mhm.
and sometimes reality hits, right? Unfortunately, and you can't change the world. You gotta realize maybe I always say this thing for the hub, it's like, if we help one person in this month's magazine, we did our job.
Mhm.
Is we're not gonna change the world, but we may help one person. And I wonder if that is such a pressure on today's kids. Could
So you just talked about something, and the other piece is looking at radical acceptance. You're
oh,
looking
wow, yeah,
so you're looking at you recognize you're not going to change the world, but if you made a difference with one person,
right.
then you've at least done something, right? So that's that radical acceptance piece, accepting that you're not going to change the world, but what can I do to help in the meantime, right? Like to speak about the younger generations, your children are in their 20s. I have a daughter who just literally became a teenager. Um, so I'm dealing with, but looking all those different pieces. She is a teenager. She is coming to her own. She's developing her own personality and all those other pieces. And I even look at when I was growing up versus when she was growing up. And I won't tell you what decade I was growing up in. But when I was growing up, technology wasn't there. We didn't have social media. We didn't have all those different pieces. And I find communication is always different, like the way they communicate nowadays versus like we would go knock on our friend's door, whereas instead they're sitting there in the same room texting each other, like those different pieces. And we've lost some things. So technology has been, I think it contributes to some of those ongoing anxiety issues. But I also think technology is a good thing. Don't get me wrong. There's a lot of benefits and a lot of cons to both. And it's how we can help our youth develop the skills. We always want to try and instill the values that we've learned growing up, recognizing that things have changed and how we would like, them to be able to have a better toolbox coping skills that maybe we didn't deal with, but we're not dealing with issues that they've dealt with, right? We didn't have, and again, I know the pandemic is come and gone and all that sort of stuff, but that was a huge chunk of my daughter's life when she was going into school. She was only in grade 1 when the pandemic hit. So then she's so literally just changing her friends and all that sort of stuff. And it's so strange. Like to speak about anxiety in different pieces. Actually, I was out for we were at a takeout place and we were grabbing dinner real quick, and she didn't wanna say anything. She felt anxious even asking the person for what she wanted for her food, which I don't get. To me, that is just but she just was very apprehensive and her anxiety was there. But when I asked her to go and do me a favor and go to the and I'm gonna drop here, she's in the Brantford Skating Club. So she is connected to Leah and Trent, who were just part of the Olympic team in Milan.
Yeah,
So when I asked her, I said, "Oh, I wanna get this signed for your niece or your cousin who lives in Edmonton." She goes, "Oh, okay, I'll go ask them, no problem." And I'm going, "How can you easily go to" and me, I'm looking at I would be intimidated by talking to Olympic athletes, but she has no problem with that, but asking somebody at a service counter to be able to order a hamburger and fries was, like, the most terrifying thing. It was just it's an odd piece. I don't understand it, but I also don't tell her she's wrong or any of that. It's, "Hey, you gotta kinda help. How can I help you build your confidence?" And maybe that's where some of the anxiety comes in too. Your own confidence, your own abilities, and your own self-worth.
would she do it if you weren't there?
She would start? I don't know.
Like, how you're I've seen this scenario with members of my family too, and I'm like, "What would you do if I wasn't here?" I you don't
Maybe in her
I
safety
don't
net,
know.
what it
Yeah,
is.
maybe, or, you know, it's
'Cause
just
she's gone to
it's a strange balance, isn't it,
It
sometimes?
is.
You're
It
like,
is strange. She's gone before to somewhere and ordered something without an issue. She'll go out with friends to the mall or she'll go and do like there seems to be no issue, but when I'm there, she's frozen. So maybe it is me and she just feels more comfortable in having me deal with it. Really, truly, it was just a simple order, but
right.
I don't know.
And it's interesting. Yeah, I don't know, and I think when I look at the older generation, because that's we sort of were doing an overview, and some of the folks that are, retiring now, and I see the anxieties they're dealing with on the
Mhm.
other end of this.
Yep.
And a lot of them, maybe they did the same job for 40 years, and it's
Yep.
back to that routine, and it's now they have this anxiety where they don't know what their value is socially. They've never maybe had to volunteer or understood or and never took the time, right? So,
Yep.
it's a big change at both ends of the spectrum that you're seeing.
So it's fear, right? The
Yeah,
fear
it's fear-based, for
own.
sure.
That's definitely a fear-based piece. The other thing is too, loss of routine, loss of structure.
Well, it's almost like they lost their, what's the word? Their there's
It's their
place in
identity.
society. Yeah, their
It's their
identity. That's
identity.
thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. My father-in-law, who is 83 years old, lost his wife in June, end of June, and his structure back then, he hadn't been working for, 20 years, or maybe not as that 10, 15 years, but his routine drastically changed.
Right.
And that creates some additional pieces, some additional anxiety and all these different pieces. To the point where even yesterday I was having a conversation with my husband and he goes, "Well, dad asked me to get this for him and drop it off. And he made it sound so urgent. So we dropped it off." And his response was, "Okay, thanks. I'll deal with that next week." And it was like, you made it sound like you needed it. Like, but it's all of his anxiety. It's just that whole piece of making sure it's his routine and he's struggling to find a way to reinvent his routine.
Yeah, I mean, all factions of society, all age groups are dealing with anxiety, and I mean, the numbers you guys see it is growing
Mhm,
exponentially, and
mhm.
you throw in some world politics, you throw in this and that, and all of a sudden, you can see how people, I'm a big advocate, turn the phone off and go for we're lucky, we have lots of woods where we are, just go for a walk, turn it off, look away, reset, 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 right? And then you're good to go again. But I think sometimes we all need to just let it go a little bit. As far as like we talked about earlier, it's not a big thing. You know what I mean? Walk through the door, it's easy. And sort of like you said, maybe there has to be a certain piece that has to be in place to do that, make that happen. But at the same time, understand that you are capable. Like we can all do this. And I think I got to go back and talk to you a little bit more too. I just about programs that you guys have because we haven't even brought that up yet. It's so critical that, if you're, we talked earlier about, realizing that somebody's in the same boat as you are. You don't think that way, but there is. So let's talk about how CMHA can help.
Okay. So we have lots of programs. We have so in I'll speak about I'll go with the residential first. We have the safe beds in Brand, which is a justice-based referral program, but we also have the crisis stabilization bed in Norfolk,
Yes.
NIMCO. So looking at those 2 different programs, so CSB, the Crisis Stabilization Bed Program, typically is up to a 7-day stay. Somebody who's dealing with a mental health crisis, whatever that is, and they're wanting that additional, they need to take that pause to step away and figure out how to reconfigure or whatever it is that they're dealing with and how they can move forward, what supports they could need in place, whatever it is that they're dealing with. That's the stabilization piece and trying to figure that out. That's up to a 7-day stay. When we flip to the safe beds piece, and that's a justice-based referral program, that's up to a 30-day stay. So that would be somebody who has been brought in by police, or has been in contact with police and then taken to hospital within a 24-hour period. They could be referred to the Safe Beds program. There's beds in Simcoe, there's beds in Brant, and then vice versa for the stabilization. We have a couple of beds in Brant and the rest are in Simcoe. So they complement each other. And when somebody comes and is dealing with that piece, they've been involved with the police, could be suicidal ideation, it could be they're in the middle of a psychiatric episode. Like there's all various reasons why somebody might present to us. And what we would do to help them with figuring out supports, what their goals are, how to be able to help them. Maybe it's somebody who was at one point in time dealing with their mental health disorder that they were working with, and they've gone off of treatment. Now they want to get back into treatment with medications, connections to psychiatrists. We're there to help with that navigation piece. Maybe we're there to help connect them to counseling services that can help them with working for coping skills, CBT, all those different pieces. We're there as that navigation.
Okay.
Those are our residential. We also have case management. We have our court supports program. I know I think you had Gerald talk once
Yep.
before from our court support team. So we have very intricate programs that can help an individual with whatever goals they're looking for. Court supports is obviously connections to and criminal involvement, also while somebody's dealing with mental health concerns, or case management or community support services. That would be, again, that additional navigation piece. I talk about CSB and BSB, the safe beds and the stabilization bed program. Those are short-term connections. CSS, which is the community support services, those might be longer term case management, navigation, and those pieces, working towards whatever that person's goal is. And it's that very much client centered approach where the client is the one that identifies what goals they're wanting to work on, whatever it may be. We might go in and say, you know what, you're dealing with some mental health, so we need to focus on your anxiety and that. When in reality, and we talk about this in another piece, an example is somebody who wants to take a bubble bath. That's all they want to do. But when they're able to build off of that, then she's going for walks around the corner, and then she's going and she's socializing more. And those small little things can help build the person to focusing on that bigger picture without actually identifying that that was their ultimate goal, but it helped build their confidence, help build those pieces. And that's where our case management can help create some of those additional resources and those additional tools necessary. Like, that's just a brief overview. There is so much
Yeah.
more that we can do. And then to look at our alternatives program, we do have a social rec program in Brantford. We have peer supports that we provide through that have been seconded through Hope. And we provide some of those additional resources to help because it's also help for somebody who's dealing with a lived experience, or sorry, somebody who's dealing with a mental health concern, to have somebody who's had that lived
Yep.
experience and helping them walk alongside them. And then ultimately my bread and butter, my role, mental health promotion and education, like I do with the Bulldogs. I just did one with the Brantford Ice Cats and did that as well. I've talked today and talked about identifying mental health and everything, but also family supports. We have family supports that are intricate and they are ultimately something that's underfunded, not funded at all, undersupported. When somebody is dealing with a mental health crisis, a lot of the times, once they've actually stabilized, the thought process is okay. So now you can return back home, but you're returning home to supports and family members who don't maybe have that support.
Yeah.
We support
Who
the individuals, but what's there to help the family, have them understand what a mental health diagnosis is, treatment, knowing, and even going way back to that whole thing that we talked about earlier when you said you're not alone, letting family members know too that they're not alone. So we actually also have a support group. We run a support group for family members who are supporting their loved ones with mental health. We have topics, we have different pieces, and watching the support that they all have together, knowing that they're not alone and dealing with some of the struggles that they have. It's a community unto themselves. And our other one support group that we do have is we also have a survivors of suicide loss group.
Yeah.
And all of our groups that we have, sorry, the family groups that we have, the suicide survivors group, as well as the family support group, those are run hybrid. You can be anywhere. You do not have to be on site. You can join virtually through Zoom, and it's just a way of connecting to us, and we add you to the distribution list and we send out the links. And then we also will at periodically working towards developing our family education program as well to provide somebody more information in how to be able to help with boundaries, how to be able to have those communication pieces with our loved ones, how to be able to crisis plan with them, and how to be able to support yourself. Because again, the fear of the unknown from family members too is, if I don't do this for my loved one, what's going to happen if I don't? But it's helping reaffirm some of those fears that we all have when it comes to our loved ones because we're so personally invested.
Yep.
But having that ability to take that step back can be helpful because we also have to ensure not only do our loved ones have to care for ourselves, and we always talk about self care, but the family members need to be able to care for themselves as well. Because when you look at the whole analogy of the stewardess in the airplane, what do you do when the plane is starting to deal with turbulence and the oxygen mask pops down? You put it on yourself first and then you help your person. Because if you can't take care of yourself, then you can't help care for others.
That's a whole nother show we got to do because you see so many folks taking care of others getting sick in the process, right? It's that's yeah, yeah. We need to do something about that down the road. Um, with your anxiety talks, then do you guys have groups that folks can join into, or is there do they? I know the intake process, but with anxiety, is there certain groups that they can, "Hey, Lisa, how do I, who do I talk to?" Right?
Yeah,
Or
so there's all different, it totally depends on what the person's open to, where they're located to. That
yeah,
one is
that's true.
sometimes that is a barrier, not gonna lie on that one. In the branch office, we actually do have some Thrive, we have some programs. One of them's Thrive. We have the walk-in mental health services. We have peer support. We have, again, I'll speak briefly about hope and how they get seconded in their peer support. They have some drop-in pieces. They have peer connections. A lot totally depends on what the person's open to. If they're looking, I've got people that I've supported who want zero involvement with groups. They don't feel
Good.
comfortable in groups. Or I have somebody who wants to do groups, but they don't want to do things in person. They want to do virtual. So then it's looking at navigating, where can I find something that's a virtual option that might be helpful? And there are different groups out there that can assist with that. It might not be specifically CMHA. There might be other resources and other community agencies that we connect with that we can redirect somebody to, because they have that group available, or they have something that meets more of their needs than what we have to offer.
It's a really cool conversation. I'm going to ask, it's not so much a question. I guess it's a statement that I had read. It was external validation versus self appreciation. And this, I think, was a TED talk I'd watched. And this person talked about, if you're struggling with anxiety, remember at the end of the day, always tell yourself three good things you did that day. Remind yourself that you're on the, you're a good person, that, you did this to help so and so, or you did this. And I thought that was really cool. I didn't really think about that till I read it, or until I saw that video. And I was like, yeah, I think a lot of folks already do that. You know what I mean? Internally, you'll look at your day and go, "Oh, I wish I did this," but think, "Oh, but I got that done." Right?
Yeah,
We all do it. But I
yeah.
just think that's such a good positive notion to end your day that way, so that you're, I mean, I always look at food, rest, exercise. You need to get those three things going before your body's going to mentally and physically work well. So, I mean, if you're at the end of the day and you're saying, I did this, this, and this, I'm going to sleep good tonight. It just starts your day so fresh the next day, right? Probably reduces that anxiety a bit too.
It's building on your resiliency.
Yep.
What you're doing is you're setting yourself up for that resiliency piece. You're taking inventory, you're doing a gratitude, you're doing positive affirmations. Like, everybody has different terms
Yeah.
and what works for them. But if you're able to take that inventory, or take that reflection on what went well, all those different pieces, those are coping skills, building of coping skills, tools that help you with building your resiliency. So when you are faced with an anxious moment, we talked a lot about anxiety, but what are those pieces, the preventative pieces? Some of these are preventative factors that can help you, that when you are facing a situation, your anxiety isn't going through the roof. You're dealing with it more at a calm and
Down the
focused.
middle.
Yeah.
Wow, this is great talk today. I want to thank you for doing this, Lisa. I love talking to you, and you get into it. I
Yeah.
appreciate that.
I
And
appreciate it.
anybody, we always have the like you said, the numbers on our podcast. Uh, so folks, check it out. Great talk about anxiety. Down the road, we are going to talk about that self care, taking care of yourself when you're helping others, because I think that gets lost a lot of times too. And then, you and I have both seen folks that end up in trouble because they weren't able to take care of themselves at the same time. Thanks
Yeah.
for doing this today. Really
Thank
appreciate it.
you. Thank you.